Games come in many flavors. Some are family-friendly and fun. Some are dark and hardcore. And then there's amphetamine. Look, if you're a game designer, there are only two reasons to name your game Amphetamine. Either it's about drugs, or you were under drugs. So, what was it? Amphetamine is a 2D platformer which is advertised as, and I quote, an exciting jump and run game that offers some unique visual effects. You must fight 11 evil monsters with your magic weapons. Based on Debian statistics alone, the package has been installed by thousands upon thousands of people. And yet, all the screenshots you can find on Google are screenshots from the first couple of minutes of the game. Why? Well, I think I might know why. Of course, if the game is poorly made, reviewers might simply be uninterested to spend any time and effort on it. That much is clear. But it's strange that no gamer has ever felt the need to share exciting screenshots of later levels. Is it possible that no one has actually reached those later levels? Well, let me show you the situation, and you do the math. The game starts off in an epic tomb. And at first, your brain might get a bit confused. It's like those optical illusions where you don't understand what you're looking at. You try jumping on the blocks, only to find that a lot of them are just background. Don't worry, get used to it. Telling what is background and what is not is going to be an ongoing challenge. You grab a weapon, you open the gate, you charge forward. At first it's all good. Kill a couple of enemies, swim through some spikes, your normal vacation in a tomb. You then face a locked door. There also seems to be some sort of a moving platform locked in place. There's a switch, it's clear what to do, you jump. First couple of jumps don't quite get you there. Maybe the key got stuck or the game requires you to be extra precise. It's clear you can totally reach it. So you jump again. And again. And again. And again. And again. As time goes by and you're still jumping to no avail, you realize something must be wrong. In fact, at first you can't believe this is happening. Maybe this is a puzzle, or there are some additional controls, but none of these hypotheses pan out. After running around the level, you are left in front of a closed door with a switch in plain view with a seemingly very reachable ledge and yourself standing below, not able to get up there. Has the world gone mad? So, what do normal people do at this point? They close the app, probably never to return. In my case, as a reviewer, I have a responsibility to my audience to do proper research and to make sure I gave the game ample opportunity. Guys, I was at it for 30 minutes straight. And I know this doesn't sound like a lot, but imagine doing this for literally 30 minutes. Now, why would I do it? It's basic psychology. You start off impartial, thinking, I'm just going to do this for a while, I don't care, but slowly and inevitably, your blood begins to boil. Because it seems that you should be able to do it. I mean, I'm like 99% there. So you start looking for patterns. What if I first face the other direction? What if I jump and use a weapon at the same time? What if I jump and move around the corridor? And you begin to get invested in this shit. I even looked into a config folder just in case there is a file which has something like annoying jump and you just have to switch it off. Of course there was nothing. And so I kept trying. I even made it once. Somehow, I found myself on top of this ledge. Having no idea how it happened, I analyzed every single frame but could find no clues. Nor was I able to reproduce this random success. Probably this was just a fluke of the physics engine. And so eventually I just gave up. But wait, I can't believe the world is so dumb. I can't believe the developer was so dumb so as not to see that their game is virtually unplayable. There has to be a solution to this, or at least an explanation. So I went into Synaptic Package Manager and looked through all the installed files. And I kid you not, I found something that I just joked about a minute ago, a config file called amph.conf. I could not believe my eyes. The file exposed basic physics engine parameters. Among them is a variable called kjump velocity, which was set at 22, so I changed it to 23. My faith in humanity was restored. I was ecstatic. It was a sense of accomplishment unlike any other. But only for a while. Then the realization came. I now actually have to play this game. The first thing you notice about amphetamine are the sound effects. and you have two choices: endure the torture or turn sound off. But since I already played God in this world once, I decided to go a step further. It turned out that all the sound effects are just a bunch of WAV files. So I went ahead and corrected some of the okay ones, completely replaced the nastier ones, and made sure that the volume across effects is fairly consistent, essentially reworking much of the game's sound design. I'm several days into playing this game, but I still can't get used to the controls. The choice of keys is horrendous. You use control to fire, X to switch weapons, and space to jump, so that seems like a good deal, but you use tab to operate switches, and because so much of the game involves hitting a switch and then immediately reacting to things, going from tab into the space area and positioning your fingers exactly over the right keys, that's just too much to process during a tense moment in the game. What am I doing now? And you are probably dead. The userconf file actually exposes the key codes, but I was not immediately able to find which key codes are these. This is where I'm a bit disappointed with myself. Maybe I had to spend more effort at the time, since later I found that those are SDL key codes, and this is an SDL-based app. But on the other hand, it would have been nice if this information was included in the file, since SDL key codes are not the results you get if you search for key codes. Typically, you get results around system key codes, and those don't match. I also remember thinking that maybe this effort is not worth it and I'm gonna be fine eventually, but believe me, if you want to take a stab at this game, change the freaking controls. The config file mentions a run button. The standard help screen in the game though says nothing about it. The button is C and it does work, but not all the time, and I found little use for it. Having many different weapons seems like a fun idea, and indeed the amount of weapons is staggering. There are 8 of them. For reference, Ultimate Doom had 8 weapons. For a little 2D platform game, that seems like a lot. But in reality, your brain has to spend way too much processing power trying to understand what's going on the screen, which weapon is activated, and how much ammo is left. In fact, the latter is really difficult to gauge from the UI. You have this bar, and you never know exactly how many shots you have left. You just see it decreasing slightly. And that's a problem, because you don't automatically switch to another weapon once you're out of ammo. You just suddenly stop firing, and it takes you a couple of seconds to understand what's going on, by which time you're probably dead. But another important thing is that you can never remember the order of the weapons. So you have to quickly go through them during battle, and some of them don't have ammo, and some of them are just not right for the situation, and there are just way too many. By the time you get to the one you need, you're probably dead. Sure, you can switch them by using the numeric keys 1 through 8, but doing this during battle is still difficult. You don't want to move your hand away from the main controls, and unlike say Doom, there is no place to run around and buy yourself time. You're usually stuck in these tiny 2D corridors. You also don't actually do that much shooting, so remembering which weapon is which is not going to come naturally. It's a disaster. I tried searching for a better word, but believe me, this is the most accurate one. Playing amateur platformer games, you kinda get used to flaky collision detection, subpar gravity logic, awkward constants that make everything jerky and difficult to control, but at least you know what you're working with and can start developing workarounds and tricks. The Amphetamine physics engine is unlike anything I have ever encountered in my life. It lacks consistency. It's a little difficult to explain, and it's not easy to get on video because it's inconsistent, but the bottom line is that the engine would behave differently at different times. The simplest case would be, say, you're laboring away at some jump, the platform you're trying to reach seems just a bit too far, so you're trying, never really making it, only to suddenly start reaching it with absolutely no problem, overshooting even. And you can't believe you ever had any problems with this jump. And you're doing everything exactly the same, it's just that the character's speed across the screen has visibly changed. I was not able to figure out what triggers this change, but this happened to me on several occasions, up to the point that certain parts of the game became dramatically easier or harder because the character slowed down or sped up. I do think it might have something to do with the mysterious run button, like the game might randomly trigger run mode you can't turn off, but this is a hypothesis I was not able to confirm. But not only that, the parameters of the engine seem to somehow depend on game resolution, so that playing the game in full screen is a very different experience compared to windowed mode. In fact, I found windowed mode to generally be easier, everything in full screen mode seemed jerkier, less predictable, and I literally could not perform some jumps, it only worked with a smaller screen. Maybe there is some tying with frames and CPU cycles, or pixels, or God knows what else, but the end result is that Playing Amphetamine is going to feel differently at different times, on different machines, and on different resolutions. And of course, the usual quirks apply. If the passage is too narrow, you might have a very hard time jumping through. Every block will have an invisible wall protruding out of it, so that you always have to move slightly to the right. Player width seems to be dependent on which weapon the character is carrying. The water is annoying. It has this sticky quality when you jump out of it, but unfortunately jumps would randomly fail, which could be absolutely lethal in many parts of the game. I can't count the amount of times I died because I could not jump out of the water or lava fast enough. And then there's another offender. When your character is hurt, the engine will not give you a cooldown period. Therefore, if you're stuck between a wall and an enemy, you're pretty much dead. That way, even the weakest monster is capable of killing you. The attack will simply continue to be propagated as long as you're touching the enemy. Additionally, the sound effect is also retriggered several times a second, creating a horrible screech that won't stop even after you're dead. And what you hear is actually not as bad as what you get with the standard version. I replaced the sound of you getting hurt with an incredibly quiet sample, so that when it gets multiplied, it's not as deafening as the original, and it's still very bad. You would think that with a game that emphasizes lighting, you're going to enjoy some nicely lit levels? Forget it. Maybe because the developer wanted to show off his lighting engine through contrast, but many areas in the game are just sadistically dark. I frequently had to put my face right in front of the screen in order to see anything. Enemies and platforms don't have their own brightness and are really well concealed by the darkness, which means that in many cases, you're looking at barely visible shadows. The monsters themselves are actually quite okay. They're all very different, with unique abilities, and at the same time they all have an aiming algorithm and are able to avoid projectiles. That's pretty advanced for a 2D platformer, and this is probably the strongest aspect of the game. I can definitely remember a couple of really enjoyable battles. And this is where the majority of problems lie. Because even with all the issues we talked about so far, you could still design some nice levels and make it an esoteric, granted, but somewhat enjoyable experience. But that's not where the game decides to go. Instead, with its inconsistent engine and poor controls, it focuses on grueling dexterity exercises, requiring you to perform pixel-perfect maneuvers that stretch the limits of your character's physical abilities even when everything is working perfectly. The game is a long series of arduous stretches from checkpoint to checkpoint. Again and again you have to jump into the abyss, hoping to land on that precious group of pixels that you can barely even make out in the dark. Okay, here's the situation. You get teleported into thin air and instantly fall into a pool of lava from which there is no escape. So, the goal is, while you're being teleported, jump slightly to the left, which will allow you to land on a platform. The platform contains a moving floor, and if upon landing on it you don't immediately make another jump, it will throw you off into a pool of lava. And not only that, but the checkpoint from which you're starting your trial is itself located in a pool of lava. So as soon as you reload your save, you have to immediately jump out, otherwise the lava will start hurting you. And that's not even the most difficult part of the level. Another thing is constantly waiting. It is normal to have moving platforms with paths that span several screens, which means that if you missed one, you'll have to stand there and wait. And the game takes this brutality many steps further. One of the most ruthless, perverse, and just plain barbaric attacks on human dignity is this part. You exit the checkpoint and teleport onto a narrow pillar, and then you have to wait a really long time. Let's experience this together. After a mind-numbing 30 seconds, a moving platform emerges. You have to jump down onto it, which takes quite a bit of practice, and it then begins its sedated trip, shoving you directly into spikes, and as you try to jump one over, you find yourself falling into the abyss. Since the engine gives you no cooldown period whatsoever, standing on the spikes drains your health in a matter of seconds. You can do it once, maybe twice, but then you're faced with these two spikes and you're done. So you have to stand on the very edge of the platform, and you get to that result through painful trial and error. Now, your actual attempts take 2, maybe 4 seconds, and then you're back at the checkpoint and back to waiting for fucking 30 seconds each time, It dulls your senses, it's not fun, this doesn't add anything to the game, I'm not even sure there is that much skill involved. It just wastes your time you won't get back. When I encountered this, I decided to time box myself. If I don't go through this within an hour, I simply refuse to be bullied like this. I'll just stop the game right there, no fucking review, nothing. But somehow I managed to defeat this bit in exactly 1 hour. But if we do the math, most of that hour was spent waiting. At least 50 minutes I spent on that pillar, just standing there. I can tell you this, the game definitely succeeds in giving you a feeling of accomplishment once you beat it. But it's not the kind of accomplishment that you look back at fondly. It's the kind of feeling you get after a long illness. The only thing you want is to get on with your life and pretend that these several past days never happened. Amphetamine has been included in repositories since 2012, and once something enters a repository, it very rarely leaves, especially if it's a game. So Amphetamine is here to stay, and since this is open source, it might make sense to outline what could be done to make the game at least somewhat playable. First, reduce the amount of weapons. I would also remove the ammo limitation. It's unnecessary and you just end up not being able to use many of the weapons for long stretches of time. Since rewriting the physics engine is unlikely to ever happen, I would focus on redoing the levels. With proper game design, this game could be made into a relatively enjoyable experience. No jumping exercises, remove the moving platform trials, none of it is fun. I would also fix the sound effects, like I did, but do it properly, and remove the sound retriggering effect, and allow to save the game at any point, and redraw the monsters, and the main character, and fix the lighting, and change the unreadable font, and rename the game, and remove it from standard repositories. Apart from a section where I compare sound effects, you never actually hear how the game really sounds. The effects are so poorly done that before filming, I thinned out the nastier sounds with an EQ and a compressor. So, if you plan on installing the game, turn down your volume. The last boss is well made and I actually enjoyed the battle. The funny part about it is that if you die, you can just wait and the boss will eventually kill itself.